Hello, this is Todd Siegel with the Psychic Zone. Anyway, good evening here. Let's talk about psychic abilities. You know, there's a lot of misinformation out there about psychics and their abilities. There's some people who've come to me who've been to many psychics before, and there's some who have not been to any. It's interesting. It's interesting because the client's kind of like a Wi-Fi signal to me, and if the Wi-Fi signal is a little disrupted, some of the messages or visions don't come through so clearly. I'll give examples of that. But I think in general, the world of psychic abilities and psychic phenomena are very, very interesting. It's a subject that I never had any interest in whatsoever until my early 30s, when I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what, and I spent a long time trying to find out what was going on with me, why I was seeing spirits, why I was making predictions about things that came true, why I could look at someone and know there was a health issue going on. By the way, if you hear my cat in the background, he's the evening is his active time, and he's a young guy anyway. But usually when I start a reading, and I do a lot of readings, so I could have 3 or 4 readings just in the morning, and I'll empty my mind within a few seconds. I just go blank. And then when I speak to the person, I'm first trying to open up that person if I feel that they are not very receptive. Now, you can't really pinpoint who's going to be receptive and who's going to be open or not. That's a very interesting thing. Now, if somebody has an attitude and you're trying to talk to somebody who has kind of a negative attitude, you're probably just not going to talk to them. You're probably not going to be receptive to them. And it's the same way for psychic abilities. So it's no mysterious opposition to the abilities. It's just that if I get somebody who's got a real negative attitude, I'm not going to be able to see anything. So, I've had skeptics, not skeptics so much as people who are willing to try to understand what I see, or they're open to it. They just have no idea how psychic works. They have no idea where the information comes from. And sometimes those are the best people to read for. I've had great experiences reading for so-called skeptics. So it doesn't have to do with skeptibility that puts up kind of a wall to what I see. It really has to do sometimes with somebody's attitude. And they may not be conscious of it. They may not be aware of themselves. In fact, they've probably been that way their whole lives and they don't know it. But it will show up in some part of their life. It will show up with events that have happened to them or didn't happen to them. Anyway, usually when I engage with a client, I will I'm not just going to read off a list of things about them. Usually people have specific topics or questions they ask me, and then I go straight to it. Now, when I see something that is really clear, I will talk about that. Some things are more vague, and that's okay. That's the way it happens. That's the way it happens with psychic abilities. Nothing is written as far as what we're supposed to see and what we're not supposed to see. So I'll make that clear. Now, in my work, there's always something that I'll focus and concentrate on. And yes, focus and concentration are very important with psychic abilities. For example, if I'm dealing with a missing person and they are somewhere in some kind of remote region, well, my focus is on the terrain. My focus is looking at how far the road is from that person. I'm looking around just like I'm a drone up in the sky, and I'm trying to pick out certain objects that I feel are going to be relevant to the client looking for them, or the authorities looking for them. So I'm sitting here in my psychic mind and I'm walking through. I'm looking at this area. I'm looking at how far they traveled by car to get to that place or by foot. And then I have to give them certain identifying material. Obviously, I can't just say, he's over by this pine tree over here. It's not going to be specific enough. But if I say, oh, well, there is an access road and there's a lot of cut down timber over near there, well, that's going to be very important for somebody looking out in the field. Or if it's a wetland and I'm looking at a certain wetland, that will help as well. My mind is busy. I'm also looking at the history. If there's something historical about this place, I will tell them. Now in Virginia, we've got a lot of historical places like that, and you might end up at some Civil War battleground. It might be famous. And I see those too. So each time I'm focusing, I'm grabbing as much information as I can to try to lead them to that person. Do I ever have doubts or second thoughts? Yes. Sometimes there's, sometimes I'm focused on an area, but really what I'm doing is I'm looking at the area, but that may not be where that person ended up. That might have been a first stop. It could have been a thought in their mind. Or somebody else might have been tracking in that area and I'm picking up on them. So I do sometimes give alternative clues, even with missing pets. I'll tell people I'm going this direction, then I see this farm and I describe it perfectly, but they tell me, hey, that's in the other direction, not the direction you were talking about. And I'll tell them that's okay. Sometimes on the map, it won't be in the same direction I'm going. It will be the opposite. But at least they found the farm. At least they found what I was looking for. And that's psychic abilities. Sometimes somebody's looking for a job and they've got a whole bunch of applications and they're doing some kind of work you don't have a clue about. Because I do have to have a clue about what they're doing. But if it's some technical this and that I don't know about, well, it might be a vague answer like I feel in July you might be getting this job. Well, can you be more specific? I think it could be the third or fourth application you signed, or the one that you did last February, or something like that. So some things are vague, some things are really specific. And that's just the way it goes with psychic abilities. The other thing, too, is information can come extremely fast. Extremely fast. So when I'm talking to a client, we're talking about their family life, and then all of a sudden they'll talk about their son and their daughter. And then I'll see a second daughter. And I'll ask them, do you have another daughter? And they'll be like, no, I don't. And be like, that's strange. I felt another child. And sometimes they don't think about it, or maybe they'll come up right away. Do you think that could have been a miscarriage that I had, or an abortion that I had? Very well could be. It could also be a niece that they're going to be very close to in the future. It could be a neighbor, somebody's daughter that they associate with. So keep your mind open. Sometimes these things aren't like, oh crap, I'm not reading very well today. No, sometimes that can mean something. Sometimes I blurted out names just randomly. Have no idea where it came from. It might mean nothing to them, but all of a sudden in the future, that name comes into focus for that person. It's like looking at like an airport, where the baggage comes through the conveyor, so everybody's getting their baggage, and you don't see what it is till it gets, down on the little conveyor there. It's kind of like that. All this information's coming through. Okay, I don't know what that object is. I don't know what that is. Oh, there's my bag right there that I'm looking for. It's sort of like that. Because we don't always get the answer that we're looking for. Sometimes it takes a good deal of time. Sometimes it takes a lot of wrong answers until we get the right one. That can happen on cases quite a bit. I'm searching for some woman and she's sleeping around with 100 guys, and I'm drawn to this house, and then I'm going to this house. Am I wrong? No. It's just that she's been sleeping around town. She's been over at this guy's place and that guy's place, and I'm seeing it, but where's the final answer to where that person is located might take a little time. Same with missing pets, too. I have to start at the beginning. So if you said that your dog was gone 2 months, at the time for a reading, and there were no sightings, I'm picking up the steps from where the dog went, where he went off to. Could have been a car that I saw picking up the dog. I will focus on the area. I'll check out the map. Do I feel this dog is on this map in this area? Nope. Feel the dog is out of the area. So you got to keep really open. You have to really kind of open your mind and not get frustrated. Okay? Because oftentimes wrong answers can be right answers. So don't doubt. Don't doubt what you see. It could be important. Could be some of the names that I've given could come around a year from now to that person. Also, sometimes things change, especially with relationship readings. I've noticed that something will happen where this person who is supposed to be with you all of a sudden doesn't show up, doesn't call. That's not what I call a mistake. It means that you did see the time when you were coming together happening. It could be at a later date. Or it could be that somebody came into that person's life that disrupted it and pushed them out of achieving their goal with you. That's happened a lot. Now, there's different angles, too. You have to use different angles when you're doing psychic work. And what I mean by that is, let's say this woman is waiting for this guy to come into her life. They had a great beginning. They went out on dates. They got along really well. And then all of a sudden, the guy just disappears. No text message, no email, no note, call. Okay, but you saw that person, you saw the two of them a few months from now, getting together, being romantic. That could possibly happen. But, see, a psychic prediction isn't a blueprint. Okay? I mean, an ex could have come back and severely hurt this guy in the hospital and he won't be out for 3 months. Yeah, it's happened before. So, is it your fault for giving that prediction? No, not necessarily. This is something you might not have been able to see. It might have been something from their past that you didn't focus on. So, one thing that can help alleviate that with those kind of predictions is to examine the person in question a little more thoroughly. You know, how much baggage do they have? Go back 2 years. Do you see the guy ghosting another relationship as well? Does he have a history of doing that? See, in the prediction, you can't always see that. So that's what I call looking at a different angle of the subject. Now look at your client, okay? Look at where she's going. Also, don't believe every client you talk to. There could be a history of some issues there. So, as a psychic, I take all of those things into account. The spirit world is a little bit different. The spirit world is not like a lot of stuff out in the internet and a lot of stuff on TV describes it to be. The spirit world is when I do, well, I call it a psychic reading, but some will call it a mediumship reading. Some will ask me, they'll say, well, Todd, could I have a mediumship reading with you today? And I'm like, what, do I have another hat that says medium on it? It's all the same ability. some psychics aren't mediums, and some mediums aren't psychics. Okay? But I bet if you're a medium, or if you're out there and you do wonderful work and you ask me, you said, Todd, I'd love to do some of this detective work. I'd be like, yep, I can help you. I can help you. It's just a different way of learning about your abilities. Now, some mediums don't want to do my kind of work at all, and I don't blame them. It can be gory. It can be, it can be really depressing. When you're feeling somebody who got shot or, decapitated, or you're, looking at really bad people who commit crimes, it's really not fun. I just kind of ignore it. My main objective is trying to solve the case or trying to solve what happened, But mediumship can be frustrating a lot of times, especially when I have a client, my mom just passed. I want to communicate with her. Mom might have jumped the coop. She might not be there. She might be in a transition world. And she could come around maybe a year or two from now. You don't know. When I examine, not examine, but when I'm reading somebody and I'm looking around their location, looking around where they are, and I don't see that mother there, it's not a bad sign. Usually to me it either means two things. Either she's in a transition period, and there are transition periods where the dead are not fully engaged in their spirit life, in their spirit world. Then there's some, even people, I've seen this with car crashes, who, they're in a car crash, they're dead. I see them walking around. They're walking around the area in spirit. Or they're going right back home. They're going to talk to their kids. But it's different every time. And that can be... The public sometimes doesn't accept that. They're just like, well, you're doing a job and I paid you to do this and you should do it. It doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. And I may connect with somebody at your home who may not be related to you, but they're a spirit. They might have lived at your house before you. It could be somebody close to you or that's around you because you're a nurse at the hospital, you work in the operating room, and somebody died and they followed you home. That can happen too. Some of the most interesting ones are people who work at funeral homes. I've done some of those as well. Talk about a busy house of spirits. Now, usually in that case, they don't really follow them around. What will happen, though, I've done some readings for some nurses that work in hospice and who also work at nursing homes. And they've gotten very close to their clients. And I remember doing a reading for a nurse who, she worked at a nursing home. And I mentioned a name, I described a woman. And she says, I don't know this lady. I said, could this be somebody who was a patient at your hospital there? And all of a sudden her eyes lit up. She said, yep, I know who you're talking about. You are significant to that person before they passed. So why do you think they wouldn't acknowledge you? you might have been very important to them. So those are always very interesting readings, especially regarding spirits. Now, some spirits come through loud and clear, very loud and clear. And I've done those readings for people who are very high on the skeptic chart. I remember doing a reading for somebody who was in the military, somewhat retired in their 60s. His wife passed away and of an illness. And she came right to me. I mean, she was describing the decor around the house. She was describing her cat. She was talking, just, I mean, this man was blown away. He did not expect that. But she was a very, very sweet soul, very great person. And boy, she came through loud and clear. What was her reason for being there? I think she was concerned about her husband. We can't help being sick. We can't help dying. So there are some spirits on the other side who are very aware of this and very conscious of the ones that they loved and they're still around, making sure they're okay. There was one reading I did. Now, some of the best mediumship style readings that I've done are for people who did not come to me for a mediumship reading. Those are usually the best. You have no clue before you do the reading whether there's going to be somebody popping in. This was probably a couple of years ago. I did a reading for client down in Florida, and we were talking about I think it was a dog who was sick, or we were talking about a dog, and that was the purpose of the appointment. Now, I've also read for her best friend, who lives not far from her, before, but as I was doing the reading for my client, I mentioned a name, some lady's name. And then I mentioned her best friend. And she put two and two together and she said, "Oh my God." She says, I've got to call her over. Or put her on the phone or something. So she did. And so I spoke to her friend and I mentioned this name, mentioned this person. I described her. Young woman. And she was not doing too well in life. She was, I believe, on some kind of drugs. And she drove down a highway in Florida, and she just stopped on the side of the road in her car. She got out, I believe, probably in a not so good way, and walked down the road, went down to I think a ditch, fell asleep and never woke up. Now the police found the car, but they did not find her body for, I believe it was over a week. Took a while. I was describing this whole scene to her friend. She was in tears. I was telling her that, not to worry. She was sending her love. She also told me about these objects that her friend was wearing. And I gotta say, so this appointment that was supposed to be a half hour, and I kid you not, it went for 2 hours. 2 hours. Now I took the time out. This woman who passed away on the side of the highway really wanted to communicate to her friend. So I made it happen. And she just wouldn't stop. She wouldn't stop talking. She was talking about her brother. She was talking about her home. And she was, I don't remember all of it, but I remember it was very intense, very specific. I could describe the way she speaks. I could, describe her hair color, her nail color, whatever she wanted to know. And I think it impacted this client's friend for life, honestly. It was one of those things that she wondered about. She didn't know what happened, only from the police report. She didn't know what was going on at the time. She didn't know people that she was close to were around. Nothing. So this spirit of this woman came through a client of mine because she knew my client was friends with her best friend. So some of these mediumship readings can get very involved. And a lot of and these are the ones that people did not expect would happen. I've done some others like that just sort of popped up right out of the blue. I'm speaking to a client. All of a sudden somebody comes through to them and they know exactly who it is. So when I'm doing this, I will give them a description. I will say, okay, this man has a large build. His hair is gray. He has facial hair. And he's got an accent that sounds like this. I'll describe the accent. I remember this one time, it was for an Australian man. And he had a really, I've never been to Australia, but he had a very different sort of accent. Like in the movies in the Outback, that kind of accent. Not completely common. And not all Australians sound the same way, okay? It's just, it's like if you go to England, not all the English sound the same. God knows what happened to me when I was younger. My stepdad is very proper English, but for some reason growing up, I sounded like somebody from northern England. God knows how that happened. I think it was a past life, actually. But I tried many years to get rid of that. Anyway, so oftentimes I'll give a description, hair color, just, I'll say soft face, very good skin. I'll say that, maybe this person passed away in their 60s, or maybe they're an 80-year-old, but they look like they're very young, very young features. I'll give them something significant. And if they say, no, that isn't anybody I know, so, well, this is who's coming through. I don't know who it is. But that's the hard part about being a psychic is dealing with people's expectations. People have expectations of you and what you do, and, well, it just doesn't happen that way sometimes. It just doesn't happen that way. But as far as psychic phenomena, if you're trying to, let's say, develop your abilities, first of all, you have to be able to empty your mind, to blank your mind. That means no emotion, no thoughts. You're not sitting there thinking about your bills that you've got to pay. You're not thinking about eating Mexican food right now. You're not, thinking about your girlfriend. You have to learn to blank your mind very quickly. It's just somewhere between being present, being unemotional. Now, I will tell you a little bit, something that can happen. And that's where I'll see a name for my next appointment because I get a little notification. And instantly, I start getting visions. Instantly, I start seeing things. Now, be careful when you do that, because then when you talk to that person, make sure that you are seeing this correctly and that it still stands true when you speak to that person, or it's still validated. Because it sometimes goes through some kind of a time warp or something, like it could be somebody associated with it, it could be someone else you have an appointment with later on. So make sure. Sometimes you just have to sit tight and talk to the person. The voice gives off a vibration that we can read as psychics. Now, I used to do email readings for people, and I still do for people who are overseas or may have poor English, or they may not speak English at all. So I'll always accommodate somebody in that respect. But email readings I do not do anymore. And there's a lot of reasons. The main reason is that nobody reads their emails. So they might be asking me about a subject matter, and I might have a question for them. I'll reply and ask them a question. I won't get any reply back for weeks because people don't read their emails, and oftentimes it goes in their junk mail. So it's very frustrating. And then I'll give, I'll get some people who write me a whole book, email question. And all of that just confuses me. It's just too much to look at. I'm not a big book reader. I usually like it straightforward and to the point, and not a lot of emotion coming through the whole thing. Yeah, I've had people send me long letters, and that's a mistake. Another thing about psychic abilities, and this relates to that, is that we do have a limited capacity that we can concentrate. Usually my focus past a half hour just kind of dissipates if we're talking about the same subject over and over again. I remember I used to offer an hour reading to people. And I'd get somebody who, for that full hour, wants to talk about their boyfriend. And it was awful. It was really bad because a question that I can answer in about 3 minutes, they would want to talk about for an hour. And if I felt this guy wasn't good for them, they would spend at least 45 minutes trying to convince me why they felt that person was good for them. How dare I say that, this guy isn't good for them? And yeah, especially of relationship readings, I'll get a lot of people who want me to tell them what they want to hear. And if they don't hear it from me, they will call a bunch of other psychics so they will get the correct answer that they want to hear. It is frustrating. Relationships are not hard for me. They're very simple. But circumstances can happen, and then the client gets all kind of pissy because things didn't work out that way. Well, I did warn you that, so-and-so is this way or that way. I still remember the one time that this client, she wrote to me and she said, she said, you were right about me finding a partner in August. I said, oh, cool. She says, well, it's December now. And she says, I'm just not happy with this partner. And I said, well, you asked me if you'd have a partner, but you didn't ask me if you were going to be happy with them. She I think she lost it. It was just like I was doing a reading for this executive, this man who was older. I'm not going to get too specific, but he was owner of a very large radio station, retired, and so we were doing a reading, and he was, I believe, in his 80s then. And he asked me, he said, how long do you think I'll live? And I said, at least 5 more years. But if you don't, I'll give you a refund for the reading. His eyeballs rolled. He's like, what the? Anyway, I thought it was funny. Humor is a good thing to have in readings. Very good. Humor is a blessing. And a lot of times when I go on the phone with somebody, if I just get that little slot there that's opening for some humor, I'll do it. And it can make all the difference in the world, because once they start to laugh or giggle, they're open. I'm in. I'm able to read them really well. Now, some people, it will take a long time to read them. They booked a 15-minute appointment. It's not until 14 or 15 minutes when all of a sudden I'm getting through to them. I'm getting some good vision through them. And it's okay if I go over time, once or twice doesn't kill me. If I have other people after, that can be a problem. But it's a very hard sort of business. But I can honestly say, after doing this, since about 2001, it's a long time. Can honestly say that the outcome has been very positive. You can't always satisfy everybody. You can't always find every missing pet. And you can't always, well, that's the thing. We talk about accuracy, but what is accuracy, honestly? And the way I look at it, I'll get people who are like, well, do I need to meet you in person for it to be more accurate? And I'm like, no. Actually, that's worse. And they'll be like, why? And I'll tell them there's been some situations where I've read people and they look at me so intensely that it makes me feel uncomfortable to be around them. So, no, it doesn't make it more accurate because sometimes it's the wrong situation. Yeah, it makes things worse. I knew one psychic, very good psychic, who told me that if she was reading somebody face to face, she would have to go in the other room opposite them and then read them. Now, if you think that's strange, it isn't. It makes perfect sense to me. Not only that, I'm a shy person. So I can look people straight in the face, but not very long. I'm not an eye gazer. And, but anyway, to sum up about psychic abilities, now remember that not everything is a long focus, but there is focus there. There is focus. Okay, sometimes the answers come quick. Sometimes you don't know what they mean. So you get these little puzzle pieces and you got to put them together. And if your focus leads you to somewhere that's the wrong place, don't worry about it. You may eventually get the right place, the right location. So if you're a new psychic starting out, don't be hard on yourself. If you try to have fun, it actually can make things a little better. I don't know if I have fun doing this. It's hard work. It's hard work. I can get burned out very easily if I'm not in a good frame of mind, If I have a lot going on in my life, things just haven't been very good, and I'm doing psychic work, I can get burnt out within a day. I mean, I can get burned out very quickly. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed this talk. I was talking to myself, basically. And I appreciate all the nice comments that everybody wrote on YouTube, because actually this podcast goes on to YouTube. There's not big changes going on, but I do have some updates to my website that I'll be working on soon. And this week I have a sale on readings, which people appreciate. And I hope you enjoyed my last podcast. I was a little reserved about how I was going to do it. It's pretty frightening to me what's going on in the U.S. right now in politics. It's a disaster, really. It's a disaster. I don't know when this country will ever balance out. There's a lot of karma there. There's a lot of karma. We just need somebody who can do a job. not for power or fame or glory, just do their job. And this political stuff and the people who have been using it for their living for so long, it's pretty sickening. And it's pretty sickening what they get away with. I can see it very clearly. All I can say to people out there, and I've seen this happening quite a bit, is they are still divided. They still are so stubborn about their belief system. And it's going to, if they have children, if they have grandchildren, please open up. Stop watching the media. Stop believing what you believe in and look at the right answer for a change. That's all I can say. Because we're in a lot of trouble. We're going to be going through a dark period. Now, I've had some people who are intuitive who've told me, no, I feel it's going to be very good at the end of this year. And I'm like, well, I hope so. I hope it ends well. I hope we can fix things, repair things. But the whole system has to be basically taken apart and start over again. That's what I think. So, stay tuned. We'll talk more about this. You can always ask a question on, either Facebook or YouTube when the podcast comes out, and I appreciate all of your input. And I really appreciate you guys. I really do. You've all been wonderful. It's been a hard time. As I got more popular, the more opposition I would get. You get people who would book appointments just so that they could try to prove me wrong. I kid you not. I had people who just wrote, nasty letters. But amongst that, I've had great positive input from people. And I really do appreciate it. I'm not trying to prove anything with this job. I'm just trying to do my work. I do it daily. Anyway, if we want a good approach to this world in the future, and to get through this dark time with people who have ulterior motivation, we need to focus on love. I know that sounds kind of corny, but we need to focus on love and what's really important. When you're caring for somebody who's elderly or somebody who's might not have long to live, you really start to appreciate the love. Even for a brief moment, a smile, some eyes of acceptance, a hug. Those things matter. Those things are the only things that matter. Anyway, my cat is calling me. He says it's past his treat time. Anyway, take care, and I will talk to you soon. Be well.